get dangerous. Why not put stuff out there that gets people riled up? And you know what? It's not hard to get people riled up in this nation. Just ask Wyatt. He gets them riled up every stinking day at Lowe's because they're looking for duct tape, and he sends them all now looking at toothpaste or rings for the toilet because that's the way what life works now. Americans just going crazy, nuts, despising each other when they disagree with each other. Things couldn't have gotten more chaotic in the last few years. And yet, my show single-handedly tries to cobble things back together. Find a landing place where everybody once again can feel like they're just one. Don't have to agree, but feel like they're just one American again. That's what this is all about. But yes, last week did some damage. And folks weren't pleased. Well, you know what that means. I should back up. I should be a little bit more tender, a little bit more safe. Make it a little bit more open to everybody and inclusive. You think that's what I should do now? No, I'd say tonight's the night we double down. If you're here, you're watching Brad Stine Has Issues. And if you hear a faint song in the distance, why, that'd be my theme song. And if you've never heard it, you have now. Hey, it's me, God's comic Brad Stine. This is Brad Stine Has Issues. It's the place where comedy, Christianity, conservatism collides in a cacophony of clarity. That's what this show does. It's a podcast of podcasts. Usually there's a screw-up. Usually things get out of focus. Usually the camera collapses. Usually the mic bursts into flame. And usually it's Wyatt's fault. Wyatt's my son. Wyatt, how are you today, son? Come on.
Not gonna lie, not the best.
What's wrong, son? Tell me. Just be honest.
I have the absolute worst allergies around this time of year.
Talk to me about allergies. So are you saying that you're blowing your nose on a constant basis?
Yep.
So do you walk around Lowe's with that apron on just so you can blow your nose in it?
No. I just put the tissues in it.
Oh, so you got a whole bag of tissues?
No.
Did they come in a drum? And if they did, aisle? Tissue drums.
Tissue. Oh, I thought you meant actual like music drums.
No.
Tissue drums would be aisle 29.
See what I'm saying? So that's the point, is that at least you know where to get it. And listen, since you work for them, do they let you just to grab an item off the shelf and break it open and get to it? Because you're working for them, so who are they to judge?
Well, funny you should say that.
Oh,
I recently heard about an employee, a cashier, who had a habit, and this actually happened.
Okay.
He would go to like the front displays of all the like the Doritos and chips.
Okay.
Just scoop the entire thing into a cart, go to the break room and eat them. Didn't pay for them, just did that.
What happened to him?
Oh, he got fired.
Okay.
6 months later.
Did you get him on tape?
Well, no, but they noticed a pattern when he did it every single day for those 6 months.
That's weird.
Yeah.
And they never said anything to him right off the bat. They just let him
run
roughshod for quite some time. Loading up on Doritos, I'm guessing?
Any chips you can get his hands on, I guess.
My goodness. You remember the guy?
I didn't know him.
But you cared about him, didn't you,
No.
son? You tried to track him down, tried to make him change his ways?
No.
Tried to talk him down from the ledge, tried to teach him to be a man of honor. Why were you there in the break room praying over the man? Did you lay hands on him?
I was in the break room seeing how many chips he'd get this time.
Well, you're crazy. You know who is on tap here tonight? It's Nick Kress. And, you know, Nick is interesting now, son. Now, for those of you who are new, Nick Kress, or as we call him, Saint Nick, has always been really quick to the draw. He's always been the number one commenter, but he doesn't comment anymore. He's gotten so, how should I say this, White, so cocky that now when he shows up first, he doesn't even say anything. He just says, Nick is watching. Like he's our grand overseer, our wizard who just watches. He just doesn't have to talk anymore. He's got the so down, son. He can just watch. Watch the chaos as people run into each other trying to figure out how to beat him to the punch. They can't. Now, he lost for a while. He got out of step, and something has changed. The man has gotten back number one, and now he just shows up to watch like he's Santa Claus. Wyatt, does that make sense? Being Saint Nick, Santa Claus, you better watch out. You better not cry. You better not. I'm telling you what, Santa Claus is coming to town. He sees you when you're sleeping. And he knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good. So be good for St. Nick's sake. Sean is not on yet, but we're going to see who comes up after Nick, and that would be Ashley Haas. I'm not sure if I know Ashley. Is Ashley new, son?
I would assume so, yes.
Okay. Nick Crest, hello, Brad. He came on third. He just certainly threw it out there. You know, it's like he's a king that can just say, you know, I've decided to go ahead and say a mention. I don't normally do this. I enjoy just watching, overseeing the good work. But I've decided to throw you a bone and say hello. So not only does it get first, but then somebody shows up that we don't know, and then he comes in and just throws out his little thing. Still beat Karen to the punch, and I'm wondering if she's out there. Chris Felthausen. Hello, everyone. Hey, Chris, glad to have you back. Chris is starting to become a regular, right? Have you noticed that?
Kinda, maybe.
No, you didn't notice it.
No, not
you
at
don't
all.
even know who he is.
No.
Okay.
I barely even remember you half the time.
You know Louis Leon is here, right?
No.
Okay, well, he is. And by the way, Paula Faye Marie Raunchy, who happens to be my favorite
Four-named lady.
four-named lady, she's here. She's happy. She's just, and she doesn't go into depth. Why? She doesn't break it down. She doesn't have some insight or doesn't even leave a recipe. She's just there to say, I'm here and I got four names. Gina Sizemore, she's here. Carrie Tudor, there they go. Hey, Brad White, everyone from Kinsman, Ohio. Yes, ma'am. Beth Franklin, hello, guys. God bless. Marsha Pointer Reed, we love her. Good evening, Brad and White and everyone. Karen finally shows up. She apparently was on the toilet. Hey, Brad. Hey, Wyatt. Hey, all. Murph Appling. Howdy, 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 y'all. Now, I don't know. Is Murph new, son?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
Is Murph Appling? What are you doing?
I'm trying to read the comments and also listening to you and also trying at the cough into the microphone.
Well, listen, you're my sidekick, so I think kicking side is a little bit quicker than reading the comments.
Okay, fine, but it's really more the coughing thing, really.
Jimmy Green, he's here. Hey, hey, he said. James Voigt, he's here. Hello from the Midwest. Let's see. Gianna Sizemore says, can we have the skit guys on for an interview? What do you think, White? You want to have the skit guys on?
Who are the skit guys?
They're guys that do skits.
Okay, but do we have the skit guys?
They're not on.
Well, can we get them on?
We can get them if we wanted to track them down. They're on the lam. They're thieves. They come in, they do a little church show, and then they rob the bank and take off. They're like the Bonnie and Clyde, but they call themselves the skit guys, so it makes them sound less dangerous.
Wait, they're thieves? I thought they did skits.
No, they're skit guys. They do skits. Couple guys doing skits.
So the skit guys don't do skits. They
do sketch comedy. Sketch.
Okay, but
Yeah.
so they do sketch comedy, not skits.
Improv.
So they do improv, not sketches.
Skit probs. They should call themselves skit prob guys.
Okay, look. All I know is that these are some thieving,
Yes.
improv.
So
sketch-
all I only
sketch
bring that up to
rules.
say we're going to have to hunt them
Well,
down if we want to find them.
yes.
Desi Wilhelm's here. Jeff Hayes is here. Let's see. David Reed, top of the day, sir. Hi, David. David's got an interesting photo. He's got a really thick white beard. Wyatt, would you want to have a white beard someday?
Not now.
I didn't say now. I said someday. So when I said someday, how did that reference now?
Well-
Someday literally is saying a day henceforth.
It means any day from the point you said it.
Right.
Technically, 5 seconds after you said it counts.
Well, if you're going to be technical, but you know who wouldn't have brought that point up?
Neck rest.
Skit guys. Because they're on the lam.
thieves.
Carrie Hathaway's here. Happy June, White and Brad. Happy to you. Let's see. Jeff Hayes, Duke Weaselton of Doritos. The Duke Weaselton. Wow, he's taking that guy down.
That must be the guy who supplied that employee those Doritos.
Rebecca Daly Dwyer's here. We love her. She's from Bellefonte, Pennsylvania. Jim Brunner. Oh, I just like Jim. What is it about Jim that we like? Is it because his picture makes him look like an attorney?
That would not be my first, second, third, or any guess. But
Okay.
yeah, sure, I guess.
Good evening, Brandon White. Looking for some positive encouragement tonight. Well, that's all I got. Is there negative encouragement? Is there less than positive encouragement? In other words, is encouragement, can it be prefaced with with a dark side and
Wow.
still be encouraged.
Great job on that joke. It almost didn't suck.
I didn't do a joke.
That answer your question?
Lord have mercy.
I'm giving you an example of how negative attention or whatever. I forgot the term already.
Rebecca Daly Dwyer said hello to Wyatt also. She didn't forget you, son, so quit weeping. He's weeping on the side, folks. You can't see that. I can. He dabs it with his roll of toilet paper that he, or tissue he got in aisle.
Tissue? 29.
29.
Well, we said...
And why in the heck would you be selling tissue anyway? You're a hardware store. There's nothing hard about tissue. Matter of fact, it's the opposite.
Technically, we're not
Software.
a hardware store. We are a home improvement store.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. And over half the store is committed to hardware.
I see. Jeff Hayes, David Harbour's coming to town. Allison Thompson, hi, Allison. She might be new. Karen Boyd, ha, you missed my first comment. Hi again. Poor Wyatt in multitasking hell. Wyatt, she feels that you have been asked to do too much. Do you think I should try to fix that?
It's the allergies. That's the only thing that's making this hard. Because it's like, it's bad enough to have to be witty while also pressing buttons. I heard that. What's that? What? No, this is hard. I don't see you doing this.
No, I laugh.
Yeah, because you think it's easy.
Because you said something to the effect of it's hard to be witty. And I'm like going, when have you ever been witty?
Oh, very clever coming from the guy who sits in front of a camera all day and is only sometimes funny.
Stan Stinson is here and he's not screwing around, Wyatt.
Like, seriously, about a third of each of these podcasts is you looking at an iPad, talking to people who aren't even in the same room.
Listen, they are here virtually.
Not really, though.
Yes, really. Are they responding to our conversation right now in real time? They're here in spirit, my son.
Brad Stine Has Issues was not filmed in front of a live studio audience. Yeah. And that's all I'm going to say.
What if we get some? Should we get a studio audience in here?
Okay, but if it better be the skit guys.
Yeah, well, you know why? They're on the line. Murph Appling, he's pressing the right buttons. Wyatt's killing me. I don't know who Murph is, but Wyatt, he loves you. Now, explain that. We've already established you're not witty. We've already established you're coughing too much. We already established you work at Lowe's and half the employees there steal. And we laugh that you're coughing half the time. We're laughing you can't find the right button. What the heck is he? What appeal do you have for this man? Is it a drug-induced, psychosis?
I don't know, but whatever appeal I have is more than you.
No, that was childish, son.
Then why isn't he praising you?
Wyatt needs to be in Skit Prov. See? He wants you to be part of who? Skit guy.
Skit guys, yeah.
Well, listen, son, I don't know if you are aware of this, but last week I did a podcast.
No.
Yeah. And it's called Brad Stine Has Issues. And it's a beautiful podcast. It's this wonderful podcast. It's becoming one of the top. It's been ranked one of the top new up-and-coming podcasts.
By you.
Well, yeah, but still, it's ranked.
I mean, I guess there's a lot of podcasts that haven't been ranked by anyone.
Listen, somebody's got to do rankings.
Yeah, and it's definitely not you.
Why?
Because you thought this one deserved to be on the list.
Why? Listen. We have this stunning podcast. We
do? Well, where is it? Can we replace it with this one?
Wyatt, listen, here's what you have to understand. This is the charm of Brad Stine Has Issues.
This is the charm? Oh, no.
Wyatt, it's the charm. I don't know what you're going to screw up today, but it's going to be something. It's going to be beautiful, and that's why we laugh. These people have come back time after time, Monday after Monday, to see the train wreck, to watch the car crash. It is Indy 500 Memorial. It is watching the guy go over the rail and spin wheel into the crowd, screaming and shrieking in horror, and end up on Life magazine. Have you ever heard of Life magazine?
How ironic.
Isn't it?
Yeah, the only people who are on Life magazine are almost dead.
Well, they would be if something pinwheeled out of control. My point is that...
Actually, no, those NASCAR cars are insanely safe, apparently.
Oh, even if they go flying at 200 miles into a crowd?
Those things are literally designed to disintegrate before they injure the driver. Kind of make them more dangerous. That would actually probably help. I mean,
but here's what's interesting.
Want to crash.
But if you fly at 200 miles an hour over the safety wall,
yeah,
and land into a crowd of folks,
yes,
I don't know how to tell you this, son, but This is integrating into the
No.
fan base. No disintegrating.
No.
They are becoming one with the molecules.
Have you ever seen an Indy 500 or similar race? They have a net. You'll be fine.
Why? They have nets because people used to pinwheel into the crowd and kill people. They have many horrifying old films of guys going flipping and killing.
I know, and that's what I'm saying. If you are a crowd there and somebody does drive into the crowd at 200 miles an hour out of control, you're fine because you have the world's most flimsy net to keep you safe.
Yeah, it does work.
Well, how? It literally looks like the kind of net that they have in like those baseball sort of practice hits things, so that the ball doesn't go out. Except instead of a baseball,
You
think it's gonna.
don't mean the batting cage, do you?
Excuse me. They
That-
use a net,
Yeah.
a cage.
Yeah.
So it's a batting.
Batting cage. Batting cage.
How is it a batting cage if there's no cage present?
It has a cage-like attributes.
Cage-like. So now
Attributes.
things can just be like other things and it matters.
Benjamin
Okay.
Gregory. He's here. Benjamin came. Welcome, God's Comedy Bread's time. Mark Carpenter, I got the burgers. Jeff Hayes, Pratt Nugent, 2024. Let's see. Oh, look, Nick said bread's not live in the backyard. I didn't understand why they were suddenly having a cookout without us. We'll come to find out it's at our house, son.
Wait, there's a cookout right now?
Hey, look, Jim Green said Wyatt 2024. Hey, Desi Wilhelm said the live audience. Listen, I was just screwing around saying a live audience, and suddenly it's like trending. What kind of crowd do we have watching? How bad is their lives, Wyatt? How bad is their lives that they watch us every Monday?
You don't really think that's the kind of conversation you want to have with your audience, but yes,
I'm not having it with them. I'm having it with you.
desperate beyond any belief. Desperate without any belief.
Talk to me about your allergy. So you have this allergy. It happens every
They suck.
yeah every spring, and you just cough all the time.
Yeah.
Now, does your Lowe's manager say, "Why? I don't know how to tell you this, but we can't let you keep coming in here. The customers are terrified."
Oh no, our manager quit.
What?
Oh yeah, our manager quit a few days ago.
But she loved you.
Yeah, she's been working at the company for 15 years and then decided, nope.
Was it because of the plank mascot that you had suggested?
I can neither confirm nor deny that.
Pushed her over the edge?
Pushed her over some edge.
Have you ever moved forward with creating the plank outfit so you can run the party, the birthday parties on aisle 26?
First off, it's aisle 56.
56?
And second of all, I keep showing people my drawing of it, and then they stop returning my calls.
Wyatt, why did they choose aisle 56 to have the birthday party?
I kid you not, because it was the aisle they determined would have the lowest chance that somebody would actually want to go down there.
Okay.
It's like all gutter stuff.
And
like,
it's still sold out. I mean, people are still just clamoring
Oh, yeah.
to have a birthday party at Lowe's.
Yeah, we do like the absolute bare minimum. And it's ridiculous how it's still effective.
But they build a birdhouse.
Or race car, or
And it's not the kind of race car that pinwheels over a net.
no,
And disintegrates into people.
No,
Okay.
the net is sold separately.
Okay, so here's what we got going here. Let's see. Carrie Tudor, it's not bad, just like when you got to say and get to hear Wyatt and see how to overcome the world in Christ. See, now this is a problem I have, and I need your help, son. So I'm joking around in the beginning. The reason I joke around in the beginning, I've told you guys this 100 times, is because I'm a comedian, and everybody that comes on new assumes I'm going to do comedy because most comedians that do a podcast do comedy. And so I thought, okay, I should give them that, but then I'll maybe show a clip of something, or then maybe I'll make a reference, and then we'll have a guest. And I care about the subject matter that I talk about, clearly, and I bring it up, and I try to inspire folks, and it's why I'm here. It's part of a ministry of my life. My livelihood is going out into the churches, going out into conservative groups, coming out to stand for religious freedoms and First Amendment freedoms and Second Amendment rights, and the freedom to believe that Jesus is God, and I do, and the freedom to try to defend this nation's sovereignty and freedom because it allows us to be free and to have liberty. So I do all those things, son. But I try to keep it light in the beginning so people can follow along, have some fun. Maybe life's been rough for them, and so I'm going to kind of give them some fun to play along with on a Monday. And then she comes in, and she talks about, the beauty of our faith in Christ, but it becomes so somber that I feel like joking around now is almost, I don't know, it's almost being trite and trivial with a beautiful phrase that she used. So, son, what do I do? What do I do? Do I pretend like I didn't read it and then keep joking around, or do I realize that, okay, they want to get to the serious stuff? Why, tell me what to do, son, and if you could get off your phone, your button for 1 second, give me some insight. What do you think?
Well, our audience wants us to get serious.
Seems like it, or at least one of them.
So I would say, and this is just coming from me, I don't have much experience in this sort of thing. You get serious.
Serious?
Seriously.
Serious.
Yeah. I mean, unless you have another way to interpret get serious that I don't know about.
You know what Benjamin just said? How desperate are you to need Wyatt's help? Now, I could have...
Now that's an entire podcast in and of itself.
Oh, you got that right. Carrie says, keep joking like that, too. God definitely has a great sense of humor. So does God. So suddenly they're letting me off the hook. So, son, here's the deal.
I think they're just tired of seeing you struggle to get anywhere.
I felt ashamed. I was joking, and then she's talking about Jesus and God, and that's kind of my purpose. It's I've been a... You know how old I was when I got saved?
9?
Yes. Why would you know that?
I guessed.
Well, anyways, I was 9. But,
I mean, you asked me a question. Why are you upset that I gave you the correct answer?
I
never give you the correct answer to these questions.
That's what I'm saying. Did you look me up on Wikipedia? Is that what it was?
That may or may not have been what I was on the phone for.
Well, here's the deal. And by the way, I didn't write my Wikipedia. Do you have a Wikipedia?
I certainly hope not. I've done nothing. Nothing.
You work at Lowe's and you're a sidekick for a top-notch podcast that stumbles along until things blow up.
Yeah, put that on my tombstone, man. I'll be rolling with the greats, huh?
Okay, well, listen, I got to tell you something. So here's what happened. Last Monday, we had a podcast. You were there. You weren't coughing like a lunatic. Suddenly no one was concerned that my partner has tuberculosis. But you were there, and we talked about the Dodgers. Do you remember that one, Wyatt?
Oh, who could forget? Yeah.
Now, what was it about that made it rather poignant and perhaps memorable?
Well, knowing you personally, I know how much you like the Dodgers.
And what happened?
Well, I said the word light, didn't I? That ship has sailed.
Why?
Well, they went woke.
Yes. And I said to the folks out there, the people watching, now you said they're not there. I think they are. But I believe in them. You don't. Okay, let's just establish that. But I talked about how the Dodgers was part of my life, part of my heritage. My dad introduced me to them when I was a young boy, and I'd sit on his lap and listen to them on the radio because we were in Indiana is where we lived, and the Dodgers were in Los Angeles. But he first started liking them when they were in Brooklyn, New York, son. So, I mean, I loved them, and I watched them, and I saw the games, and I explained it to you guys, and I passed it on to you, son. I said, we're Dodger fans. That's the day. You don't get to choose. We're Dodger fans, and we hate the Yankees. It's part of the fun, too. You got to hate the Yankees. And they decided to have an LGBTQ night, like everybody in the world. And they brought these Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, who mock and ridicule nuns and Catholicism and Christianity in very sexually deviant ways. And I just said, this isn't I mean, if you're going to bring on these other folks, that's your business. It's your business, literally. But this has gone too far. These are people that are mocking someone's religion, mocking it. And there's more Christians in the world than there are mockers in nun habits doing sexually deviant acts. So you'd think maybe you'd want to cater a little bit more to them, and perhaps these guys are not appropriate. But they said, no, you're welcome. We're going to make you heroes. That's sick. And, Jerry Seinfeld did a joke about teams years ago. And he said, you're really kind of following the uniform. You're kind of a fan of the uniform because the players come and go, and the owners come and go. When the Dodgers moved from Brooklyn, Walter O'Malley was the owner. He moved them to Los Angeles, and he was the owner of the Dodgers, as I knew. And then he got old and left it to his son, Peter, and then Peter O'Malley. And so it was part of this family that owned the Dodgers for all these years. And then they finally sold it, and they ended up selling it to, a group of people. And anyways, it's gone through a few hands, and now it's somebody that owns it. And so they're the ones that decide what their team that they own is going to represent. And I just felt heartbroken that they would mock and ridicule somebody. And I said, this is a bridge too far. And I said to you guys, if we are going to make a difference, if we are going to return to a time when corporations simply sold stuff, like Lowe's does. Lowe's entire purpose is to sell you on broken dreams. To think that you can fix up your house and make it more beautiful, but you don't know what you're doing. And then you're asking Wyatt for help, and he doesn't know what he's doing. And Wyatt has never built anything that I'm aware of. Wyatt, have you ever built anything other than Legos and, Link and Tears of the Wild? And
oh my God.
Perhaps you built a home there, didn't you?
I helped build the studio, and by that I mean I think I put a nail in or two.
Yeah, I think by saying I helped build the studio, what you mean by that is I didn't help build the studio.
Hey, supervisor's a legitimate position.
It is. And it used to be your boss's position until she ran and hid. But I was heartbroken. I wanted to be a Dodger fan. But I had to speak about it. And the thing that I said to you guys, and it was important, I said, listen, I haven't watched the NFL or the NBA since Kaepernick. I haven't watched them. I won't. Will not watch people mock and ridicule my country. I won't do it, especially when they live in the country and make billions from the country and what it provided, and then mock it, ridicule. It's just despicable to me. It just is. And I'm hanging on, I will say almost quasi-hypocritically to the baseball because I wanted to watch that. And then they start going, well, I'm going to watch my grandson play baseball. I'm hoping, I love the game. But I just said I'm not going to support the Dodgers anymore. I can't. Because any dime I give them is my approval. Any dime I give to the NFL or the NBA, they've never apologized. They never said we were wrong. They said we're now going to simply go back to giving you sports. There will be no celebration of anybody. We're just going to do sports, and then you can celebrate the sport and the team and the fun together. That's what the unity of sports was. Well, corporations now, because of ESG, this scorecard that BlackRock has insisted they must do so they can get money, so they can exist, this oligarchy of BlackRock, which must be destroyed, has now decided how corporations are allowed to even behave and what they must get behind. It's absurd. It's anti-American. It's anti-American. And I made a distinction. You're either a citizen or American now. Now there's a distinction. So I talked about Target and Bud Light. I said, if this has a shot at returning to some kind of balance where we simply provide goods and services and we don't take a side, The only shot we have, because it's gone so far woke and the wheels have come off, we have to bury a company. We have to bury it and bankrupt it into oblivion. We have to. So they realize we have the numbers, we have the momentum, we have the mobilization, we have the mission and the marching orders, and we're going to end you, and then maybe you won't do this anymore. And I wanted to just give you guys an interesting observation, because I tell you about the left and the systemic narcissism that drives them, and they are systemically narcissistic. It's under the very fabric of what it means to be woke, to be leftist. You're a narcissist. You worship yourself. You believe that only you are right. You have to condemn and put everybody down. Whatever you claim other people are doing is what you do. You lie all the time, and you are okay with lying because you're doing such a virtuous, wonderful thing that even lying is virtuous in your world. This is pure narcissism, and it's what they drive their entire belief system on. So when it came to this idea, you, if I'm not mistaken, took a clip from last week's and you sent it to our social media guy who puts it out, because clearly I don't know how to do social media, and I don't even know that you know how to do it, White, and you're of that ilk, you're of that age.
You didn't know how to turn a camera on this morning. I wouldn't trust you anywhere near my buttons.
That's because, you know why I couldn't turn it on?
Because you have the technology knowledge of a medieval peasant?
I was looking for a lever. There was none.
Why would you be looking for a level at all? This is the 21st century. Who uses levels anymore?
Well, then how about a dial?
Again, 21st century. This ain't your 1980s color television.
Zipper?
Okay, honestly, that one would kind of be interesting to see. I'm not sure how you make that work, but maybe.
Yeah. Well, anyways, I wanted to tell you guys in real time, because I've told you that if we're going to get anywhere, we got to mobilize, and we're going to do it, and the peasants are going to revolt, and that's who we are. We're the peasants to these people, to the oligarchs. This is not a new thing. It's just they got more power now than they've ever had before because of their ability to have social media and to control narratives and to control banking and to control your ability to bank and to get your money out because they want to turn it into digital currency so they can shut it down when you're not obeying the master. This is master servant. This is monarch, and the peasantry. So we have to fight back. Now, D.C. has abandoned us. They are completely corrupt, and they are owned by China. They are owned by probably the World Economic Forum, and who knows what pedophilia pictures they have of some of these guys, and so they cause them to have to make adjustments and vote the way they want to. So that America is controlled by a much bigger entity than we even realize. But you got to try. Those of us who actually care about truth and reality and the Constitution are going to try to go that route and do so. So that's why I said we got to get active. And the militia of the mind is this. It's this sort of understanding that we are a militia. We have our guns, we have our weaponry, and it's in our mind. It's how we're going to outthink them, how we're going to outlive, how we're going to outvote, how we're going to come together, how we're going to see a mission and attack it. We're going to have to do it. And so you sent out this thing, and it came back, and it really was dealing with how I said, we've got to bankrupt these people. You guys can go back and watch last week's episode, but maybe you get Instagram, because it was there, and I did this little 3 or 4 minute thing. And there was many comments, of course, and many of them hate what I stand for because they're not Americans. They're citizens. But this was one of them. And I just wanted to show you how people in the left can't think. So here's what he said. Allowing all Americans to participate equally in our freedoms and rights is not propaganda. It is what the Constitution is all about. I agree. Yeah, I agree. Allowing all Americans to participate equally in our freedoms. Yeah. It's not propaganda. It's what the Constitution is about. I agree. I want everybody to have access to the same stuff. If you don't like a business respecting all people, then don't shop there. That's exactly what we're doing. We're not shopping there. That's exactly what we're doing. They don't want you to even bring up why we're not shopping there. So the interesting point is, as the person comments, they don't even see their own incongruities of their arguments because they don't have any. It's all rhetoric, propaganda. Then he says, but do not tell that business to either reject inclusion or go out of business. I can tell them anything I want. And you know how I do it? I don't shop there. That's how I do it. Not picketing them. Not walking in and stealing stuff like the leftists do and allow it to happen. Not burning it down like the leftists do and allowed it to happen. Not rioting like the leftists do and allowed it to happen. Not beating people over the head with bicycle locks like the left did and they allow it to happen. Not standing out in front of a store like they did and allow it to happen. Not making bomb threats like the left do and allow it to happen. Not making lies about saying, oh, all the employees have been threatened. When the left threatens us all the time, they even shoot some of our congressmen when they're playing baseball. And then they have an entire commitment as a transgender woman who went in and shot a Christian school and Christians because it was an agenda. They really kill us. But they say they're the ones in danger. This is systemic narcissism. Whatever they accuse you of is a great clue to understand one thing about them. This is exactly who they are. Fear that when they start speaking the things they say. But do not tell the business to either reject inclusion or go out of business. I can tell them anything I want. I thought you just mentioned we wanted Americans to have freedom to do whatever they want. You don't mind the businesses jamming their message on my throat, so why can't I return the favor? Because you don't believe in return the favor, because everything you just said about allowing Americans to participate equally in our freedoms, you don't believe because you're a leftist, Marxist, bigoted, totalitarian despot, and you're not an American. You're a citizen. You're a parasite. That is tyranny and authoritarianism, not a free society. Yeah, I agree. Your version of America about not allowing us to go to work when we decide not to get vaccinated or wear a mask, or telling us that we were not allowed, or you hope we died because we didn't get the fearful vaccine that you guys did so dutifully because the government rules you. You know, you are the tyrant. We're on to you. It's not working anymore. Whatever you call us, we know it's not true. We know it's you. We're on to you. We're doing exactly what we promised we were going to do. We were simply going to take our business elsewhere, and it's working. We must bury Anheuser-Busch and Target. And maybe, just maybe, the corporations will say no to BlackRock. We'll get another financial institution to help them. And those guys won't be allowed to work here when they're trying to destroy freedom in real time, as dangerous as it gets. Folks, you want to see what this is going to look like? Well, I got some news. I finally got some news. We've had to work on the technology for my website and all the things that I'm trying to do for you guys to enjoy the Militia of the Mind. And as you know, I'm looking for the beginners, those who are going to launch this into the atmosphere, and they're called the Mighty 10,000. These are people that want to give me $3 a month. And that goes into the kiddie pool that allows us to make more videos and to also have a paywall by which you guys can come in and see different groups and ministries that are going to be part of this, that can give you information and insight and wisdom and education in certain areas that you're not experts on, so you know how to take this into the streets and into your community to do that. We're going to have meetings and all these things, and there'll be different levels, by the way, that you can give more perhaps than the $3, and that will give you some extra stuff. And that's all going to be launched July 1st. So you finally want to know, and some of you have already been in, and it's recorded. I still have to get the, I'm still getting the Militia of the Mind logo so we can make the t-shirts. Then we'll be able to get you your t-shirts with your number on the sleeve. as to what number you were when you joined the mighty 10,000, because there'll only be 10,000. There's going to be hopefully 10 million joining someday. But the mighty 10,000 will be the first ones that said, we launched it, we did it together. That's my people, just the grassroots, boots on the ground folks that are ready to do whatever damage they can do while they're getting good, if it is. We're trying. So you can go and give now if you want to. If you want to donate to what I'm doing, you can always do that for free. Just get on, ask for the link, we'll send it to you. But you can also just go onto my website now and say join Mighty 10,000, and they'll ask for your email, so I'll always be able to contact you. And just give your little 1 year donation, $36, which is $3 a month, and you're one of the Mighty 10. Simple. But we're going to do a big campaign and really try to launch it into the atmosphere. You guys are the first ones to know about it because you're my people, you're my friends, you're my fans, you're the ones that have helped build this into something. You're going to get a profits reward for it. So you got the first gives. As of July 1st, it's going to be out in the atmosphere and everybody's going to know about it. And hopefully it'll drive more people to the podcast. And hopefully, if nothing else, we'll be able to come up with some kind of cough-free device that Wyatt can use so that he doesn't sit and sound like the man is Doc Holliday. Speaking of Doc Holliday, I've got a doctor, or at least a detective. He is our guest tonight, and he's a great guest. You're going to love him because he is a homicide detective in Los Angeles. I don't know if he's still doing it. And he decided to use that technique of trying to find people who have murdered others and seeing if he could figure out a way to prove that Jesus is actually God, prove that God is actually real, prove how you can help people know that the greatest gift, the greatest story, the greatest thing you can know is that God Almighty actually exists and he was here and he wants you to know him so you can come be with him forever. This is what it's called, apologetics. And he's going to do that. Apologetics simply means you are making an apology or a defense for something you believe. And he's a very well-known guy who wrote many books, and you may have seen him on podcasts, or at least on his own. And he wrote a very well-known book that some of you might have read called Cold Case Christianity. His name is J. Warner Wallace, and he's just about to come on, and you guys are going to get to see him. Folks, I've got some other people I've already interviewed, and I've got some other ones coming up that you're going to find. And I do need to say this before we bring on J. Warner. I've decided I want to have everybody on this show that can come on. That means people that are atheists, people that are not necessarily believers, because I want to get their point of view, and they might have something interesting to say. So I did realize that some of these guys are salty in their language. So I said, what do? I'm not going to tell them how to speak. So I thought I'm either going to have to let them speak as they choose, and then just let Wyatt come in and beep them out, when they use a curse word, or just rate it. By the way, this is an R-rated interview because this person's, because I want the real person to feel free to speak freely. So I got someone coming up that's going to be interesting, but they're a little bit more freeform with their language, but I think you'll appreciate it in the end. So I'm going to figure that out. What you guys think, you tell me what you think would be best. Bleep it out or just give it a rating. But that's what's coming. But what's really coming right now is a very, very interesting believer in God. If you don't, this might help you get there. Cold Case Christianity author, apologist, and real smart guy. You're going to love this interview. Get some popcorn, kick back your feet, and hang on for J. Warner Wallace and me. What's interesting is that some people, I think, get disappointed when they come to Brad Stine Has Issues because they see me online, they see me on these TV shows, they see me on these films or whatever I've been on, and they see a comic because that's what brings them on, which is exactly, I think, what God used strategically to interest people in what I have to say. And I was told this a long time ago by God, years ago. He said, I want you to go to churches because in the future, I'm going to have to speak differently to my people, and I need you to renew their minds as to the way that they're going to have to see the packages I come in. Well, this was 20 years ago. I couldn't have fathomed what America was going to turn into, let alone the world. I couldn't have fathomed in that time that there would be a day when three separate political systems, theocracies, free market societies, and communists would all bow the knee to the same God. We are literally watching a new world order and potentially the kickoff of one world government. Not theory this time, not 1970s Hal Lindsey late gate plan. It's really happening. The technology is finally here that allows everything to happen that we never thought could be possible. So that's why I felt like my comedy was really God's conduit for me to just use communication, which is what I'm good at,
Sure.
to tell a story. And this ultimate story is God and how he revealed himself. That's really it. That's the meaning of life. Who's God? And tell people what's going on. So in order for me to do that effectively, I have to find smarter people than me. That's the beauty. And I actually stumbled upon a guy that clearly is here because was court ordered, because there's no way he would have come on my show if it was by his own volition, because he's way too big shot for me. But he's here. And I got to see him at my own church, Conduit Church in Franklin, Tennessee, and got to meet him for a little bit, chat, and found him fascinating. But even more so, this new book that he has right there, Person of Interest. And it's another apologetics book to a degree. So it's like, well, that's fine. The more the merrier. But this one's a little different. And it was so intriguing to me that I was really excited to say, I want to go into this particular information because you found some fringes of what has been not ignored perhaps, but not perceived as valuable. And in fact, I think are incredibly valuable in this secular age to prove the most difficult and yet important concept in history. God was a human once. So here we sit, and here I sit with the privilege of bringing on from California. It's not my fault. I'm sure the guy would leave if he could, but he is a former detective, so he probably is allowed to carry. So he's probably okay, but the rest of the guys are screwed. But anyways,
that's right.
He's here now, and I want to say hi to Jay Warner Wallace and bring him on right there. Hey, brother, how are you, my friend?
Well, thank you so much for having me. You're right. You're in California. It's kind of a crazy place but I often say that, I've been here my whole life, and what that means now that I'm a Christian, as a conservative, as a kind of holding a biblical worldview, I can look back at my entire voting history here, and for the most part, with the exception of maybe some local representation, pretty much everyone I vote for never gets elected. And it's been that way my entire life. And pretty much every proposition, not everyone, but largely, they're usually crafted by the crazy legislature in the state of California. So I oppose pretty much everything, and they pass anyway. It's just the nature of living as a Christian conservative in a dominantly non-Christian state that has a different worldview.
Yes.
And I've just kind of gotten used to it. So yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah.
Doesn't change my life or my ability to communicate now with this great technology.
Yes.
You said something interesting a minute ago, though, that I think is fascinating on a global scale. And I will sometimes talk to other Christians who are concerned that we are heading toward a kind of a one world government. And I'm not convinced that'll ever happen. Here's why. Biblical anthropology, the fallen nature of humans. If you noticed that most of us attach our power to property. So when you see a land grab, a country is like you see right now with Russia trying to re-grab back land that it gave up. That's why, in order for there to be one order, it means that a bunch of people are going to have to forfeit their property to another power. I think that is because we're so fallen and so driven by our pride, and have associated and connected our power and pride to property. The idea of giving something, you're going to have to take it from me from my cold, dead fingers. And I think that's what's going to keep all of these. Isn't it interesting how ultimately now we kind of see that we've regressed back to a very kind of modernist way of viewing power and property and boundaries, and expanding our reach by expanding the properties we call our own. I mean, it's just interesting that that's the fallen nature of humans. And I think that'll be the thing that keeps us from now. I think what will happen before that is that we will bow globally to ideologies, some ideologies that will impact all of us because the technology is a leveler. If
Yeah.
we're all on TikTok, we all start to kind of think the way that, if we're all on these platforms, then we're all equally influenced in similar ways by the platforms. But even then, I think because of language barriers, there are some innate limits to that too. So I
Mm.
don't know. It's interesting to see where this is headed. But I do think that the gospel is the cure for every
Yeah.
kind of stupid you can think of. And I
Well,
often
for
will say
sure.
that, the
Well, no,
gospel
no, no, for
cures,
sure.
yeah, stupid. So you and I are in the business, hopefully, of advancing the cause of the gospel because we think it cures stupid,
Yeah, for sure.
you know?
Well, that's funny because I was just watching a video that Bonhoeffer had made an entire discussion about the difference between stupid people. And he didn't mean that as a malicious attack. He meant it literally, because stupid, by definition, is simply uneducated, somebody who's not well able to navigate thoughts, ideas, intellectual concepts. So that's just being stupid, and we just use it derogatorily. But the fact is, some people are. If you see reality and you choose to ignore it, to give yourself some illusion of control,
Yeah.
you're stupid, because you're living a fantasy and it doesn't work, it doesn't pan out, and you're gonna end up suffering for it. And that's really what I think, what the beauty of Christianity, and it was kind of maybe a lead into where I wanted to go with you. I mean, I'm sure you've been on many interviews and probably a lot of Christian podcasts, and I'm guessing they ask you a lot of the same questions, and they should. You're maybe promoting a book or some literature, and
Sure.
that's
Yeah,
important.
exactly.
But I think that sometimes there's more for us to explore as
Sure.
believers, as humans, as citizens of the world, as to how does the Bible interact with the human condition, because
Yeah.
this is really what I think has been the downfall of American, I always emphasize American Christianity as opposed to the Christianity
Yeah.
worldwide, who have had the who've had the typical Christian experience of suffering
Yeah.
for their faith. Their persecution is not unusual. It started in the
Right.
beginning. It's always been there. There have been some respites here and there, and some moments of grace that God gave them a
Yeah.
breather. But it's like being Jewish. They are the most documented persecuted people group in human history. Why? What is it about these 14 million people on the entire earth are Jews? That's it. Why do they have 120 Nobel Prizes? Why were they able to defeat the entire Islamic State around Israel, the size of New Jersey? How is that possible? I did a documentary called Boycott This, and it was exposing the BDS movement against Israel, the Boycott, Divest, and Sanction movement. That was the same technique used to cripple South Africa. And so because they were an apartheid state. Well, suddenly they were calling Israel an apartheid state. You can guess which countries are doing that. But you study the Jews historically, and you have to believe in God because they shouldn't exist. What has, the attack on those people and the hatred toward this group of people, to me, shows me that the enemy hates and despises what God has said was sacred, what was holy, and certainly the lineage that he was going to utilize to do this once in a historical human experience, dimensionalize himself from a spirit into a human being so that he could give the atheists what they want. Proof. Here I am. What are you going to do about it now? And that's what I love about this book, folks. And you're going to have to trust me, get this person of interest, because I have read lots of apologetics books, lots of theology books, philosophy. I love all that stuff a lot. But the thing that really intrigued me was your premise. Well, I guess the presupposition that you were using to undergird this book was not just another fact data exploration as to why Jesus is God and let's find prophetic utterances and put all the pieces together, which is important. But you did something so interesting that it really, I believe, added to my weaponry, to my ammunition for defending the faith. And that is that you said, what if there was no Bible? What if there was no New Testament? What if we had lost these sort of primary signatures that started the whole thing, or the autographs, I guess they call them, the original? How would we know of this Jesus? Is there anything that could show us that this guy not only existed, but significantly had done something so outside the realm of what people had ever seen before that they had to deal with it? And you've done that in a unique way. So without sort of having you just dissect your entire book, but if you could give people just a quick sort of a synopsis as to your approach on this book and what you felt was a missing link that could add more substance to people's faith and to their apologetics.
Well, when I was 35 and looking at Christianity for the first time as a detective, I wanted to know, number one, could I trust what the gospel authors are saying about Jesus? But if he really was who the gospel authors claimed he was, I would expect there to be a much bigger impact on, like, if this is the size of the rock, hits the pond and it creates a certain ripple size. And because I was raised here in Southern California, where really I didn't know any Christians growing up, I did not learn much about Christianity in school for sure, or the impact of Jesus of Nazareth on all these weird kind of unrelated disciplines. I just didn't know anything about it. And I thought, well, I don't believe Jesus is who he said he was, if for no other reason that how am I just now hearing about it? How am I just now being aware of this amazing person? Well, if he's that amazing, I should have known about him even before a Christian approached me, because he would have huge impact, right? Well, it turns out that he does have huge impact in all of the areas that atheists, for the most part, think are important, which are usually literature, art, music, education, and science. Those 5 things. He also impacts world religions like no other person, but I was not interested in world religions. I'm only interested in literature, art, music, education, and science. Those are the things that most evaluators of culture would argue are the earmarks, the signs of advancing cultures that are evolving towards something that they would say is good or virtuous. They grow in the areas of literature, art, music, education, and science, right? That's what we kind of hold as high premiums, even as unbelievers. Well, it turns out that Jesus not only impacted those 4 areas of human culture more than any other person in the history of persons, but you can reclaim his data. You can recover the data about Jesus just from the personal writings, for example, of all the science fathers. You can reclaim the data about Jesus from the history of art, the history of music, from the top 15 universities on the planet today. If you go and visit those universities, campuses, and look at their oldest buildings, you can recover data about Jesus. Why? Because no one's had an impact on modern education like Jesus of Nazareth and his followers. This doesn't mean that, look, my whole premise here is that when you see the impact and how much data can be recovered, you have to ask yourself the question, which of these possibilities best fits the data for Jesus? If he's just a man, tell me who else in the history of men has impacted literature, art, music, education, and science like Jesus of Nazareth. If you think there is somebody, it's because you don't know much about the history of those 5 things. And if you think, well, it could be a myth, if he's not a man, maybe he's a myth. You hear this all the time. He's just another mythological deity in the whole history of mythological deities. But tell me what myth could have this impact. There is no other myth that has this impact. The third option, he is Messiah. He is who he said he was. God coming back into his creation would, I think, have the kind of impact that we see in the data. So the 3 options, man, myth, or Messiah seems to be the best inference from the data. So even if you had no scripture, you could learn everything you need to know to be saved as a Christian just from the history of literature, art, music, science, or education. Any one of those would give you enough data.
Well, yeah,
put them
and
all
that's
together, and you've got tremendous data.
well, and when you mentioned that in your teaching at the church, that was just. I mean, I'm very aware of the impact culturally of Christianity, modern science as we know it, the scientific method, because people will get angry if you say, oh, the Chinese had mathematics and they had gunpowder, and the Arab, whatever, Greeks had geometry, blah, blah, blah. Said, no, I didn't say there wasn't scientific elements of exploration that all cultures had explored. the methodology that we consider the scientific method, the concept that life is designed, that there are natural laws systemically embedded in the very molecules of material that exists, the very fact that there are types of the way the universe is shaped, moves, gravitational forces, these electromagnetic forces, all these things that are consistent, so that one can draw conclusions, because I know that tomorrow the gravity's still going to work the same way. I have to have faith in that. I can't prove I'm not going to float away tomorrow, but I assume I won't, which is a faith claim. All atheists have to live by faith, as we all do to a certain degree. And so the idea of modern science coming out of the greatest scientist maybe in the world, maybe Newton is considered one of the best, wrote more on theology, I think, than he did on and he invented calculus. Pretty smart guy. So I understand those ideas, and I'm grateful for it, because I tell Christians, this is your lineage. These are your people. Be proud of that. Understand that, and I say that when you're looking at a worldview, not only do people believe it, but does it work? Does it work? Put it into place. Which is why when communism fails or socialism fails, what do they say? Oh, let's abandon this concept? No, they say, wasn't done right. Had it been done right? How many times do you have to see something fail to realize the system needs to be jettisoned? You've got a flawed system. You said something interesting in the very beginning about being a conservative in California. I lived in California for 30 years, so I'm very familiar with it. Beautiful state. It's lost its way because of a philosophy that runs it. But to me, conservative simply means we want to conserve wisdom. We want to conserve that which has worked over time, that we can observe and see what was productive and what was destructive, what was advancing things in a way that was helpful and brought the most hope and peace, and that which was destructive. You talked about art. We had the Renaissance art that lifted up people. You were supposed to look at paintings and be in awe. It was supposed to be transcendent. Look, there's something grander. And then now we have postmodern deconstructive art, which is scatological. It's absurd. It's the antithesis of what God said you should feel when I inspire you. So let me ask you about, and so it's a little bit backtracking from where we started, but I'm curious about your foray into Christianity, because you were, number one, an atheist, which isn't uncommon. You have a similar story with, I'm sure people have brought this up, with Lee Strobel. He was searching for God as an atheist as a journalist, and he said, oh, he must be real. You're doing it as a detective, homicide detective. But there's other people who, in their deconstruction, gone the other direction. That's what deconstruction is now. Oh, no. I've looked at the facts. I'm going the other way. I'm heading out of here. And we have equal evangelical missionaries for atheism, like Ricky Gervais, Penn and Teller, Richard Dawkins. So let's find out about you, because you can give us another insight that a lot of us may not have. The spirit of an atheist. What drives an atheist? What motivates them? How do they find teleology in their worldview when there is none inherent in pure atheism? How did you manage life?
Well, I think I managed it quite well. I'm sensitive to non-believers who would argue that we sometimes, as believers, imagine that without the worldview we hold, life is somehow entirely untenable. When in fact, of course, it's not. I mean, I was a very committed atheist because I didn't believe in supernatural explanations for anything. I was a very committed philosophical naturalist. The universe is governed by space-time, matter, physics, and chemistry. There's nothing else at play. Any appearance of design is simply that, the appearance of design. And it may, in fact, appear to be designed because of the tight limitations and strictures of natural law, of physics, chemistry, and how they produce outcomes. So I would have said that there's no reason for me to default to a God, especially when our trajectory in terms of knowledge is ever growing. Mm-hmm. We know more now than we knew 100 years ago. We'll know more 100 years from now than we know today. Be patient. Don't need to default to primitive notions of God. That was my view for all those years. All the objections that you hear that modern atheists or even, current atheists level, I held all of them. I mean, I was somebody who was, I think, a very thoughtful non-believer. And I didn't find a lot of thoughtful believers to engage in these issues. For the most part, I found people who were unequipped and believed this completely on blind trust. They inherited it from their parents. They inherited it from a wife or a husband. They inherited it just culturally based on where they were in the country. Many of them were committing crimes. I'd take them to jail. They'd tell me they were Christians. A couple of them were police officers who didn't seem like they held the same level of evidential value for their spiritual beliefs that they held for their criminal trials. There was stuff that I just had no patience with. And so for me, I became interested only because my wife was interested. I'm not like Lee in the sense, and Lee's a friend. Leslie, his wife, became a Christian first. And he wanted to kind of prove her wrong. I had no desire. My wife was not a Christian until I became a Christian. So we became a Christian about the same time. We were together about 18 years before either one of us became believers. And I think we were she was neutral. I thought it was so beyond, it was not worth my time and attention. In other words, it's fine. My dad would say the same thing. If you hold a useful misbelief, a useful delusion, but it serves you well, continue to hold it. I'm not here to destroy useful delusions. And if my wife was to hold this, I would have been happy to go to church as an atheist. Because it's like, if you want to believe in Peter Pan, great. Why would I try to debunk Peter Pan? That's a stupid endeavor. Right. There was no point in it. But when I got into the church with her for the first time, the pastor presented an aspect of Jesus that struck me as worth investigation. He said Jesus was smart, the smartest man who ever lived. And I was willing to engage the character of Jesus, if for no other reason than to mine out the kind of proverbial wisdom statements that I thought were probably written by people who were making the character up. But look, you can learn a lot from there's people who repeat the wisdom statements of Yoda. Okay. So you can learn a lot from fictional characters because the mind of the writer might have something to pass on. And I always thought that if there's a piece of wisdom that's survived the ages, like even the writing of Baha'u'llah and the Baha'i faith, it's worth reading. It's kind of like if you read fortune cookies, there's always some proverb in a fortune cookie that's probably true. So, you can learn something from these things. That's my only interest. And so I bought a Bible to see what Jesus had to say, thinking it would be much like the writing of Baha'u'llah or Buddha or anyone who just makes a bunch of claims about how to live life well. I'm willing to read that. Look, some people read these modern thinkers about what, Tony Robbins and other, read it, great. But when I read it, I found that the Gospels were making claims about history, claims about the first century in the Roman Empire in a certain region around the Mediterranean. That's different. That's very different. It's not just the wisdom teaching of Jesus. It's that these are claims, and claims about events in the past can be tested, even if you have no access to the witnesses and no access to the report writers. That's what cold cases are. Now, granted, you can often corroborate things easier if only 3 decades has passed. I get that. But it turns out this is a very well-documented period of time based on what the Gospels offer. Archaeologically, there's lots of ways to make some confirmation, correlations and to corroborate some of these claims. So that was what started my journey. And I simply tested the authors of the Gospels using the 4 criteria that we use to test eyewitnesses. I wrote about this in a book called Cold Case Christianity. There's just 4 ways we test eyewitnesses. Were they really there to see what they said they saw? Can they be corroborated or verified, even if only by a small piece of touchpoint corroboration? 3, have they been honest and accurate over time, or have they changed their story? And 4, do they possess a bias that would cause them to lie? That's the criteria that judges tell jurors they are to evaluate when listening to eyewitnesses. It's a good criteria for anyone who's listening to an alleged eyewitness. I don't believe eyewitnesses. Eyewitnesses some of them are lying flat out.
Yeah.
Others
or they misremember, or they're
can't
confused.
Remember. Yeah. So we test eyewitnesses. If they pass the test, then you can trust them.
Yeah.
So I'm not stupid enough to think that I'm just going to trust an eyewitness. No, I test the eyewitness. Well, there's a criteria, there's a process. I simply used the legal process and did that with the Gospels. It took me about a year. And the stuff I talk about in Person of Interest is part of that process for me. My story is in there. But a lot
Mm.
of that for me was, hey, I got to dig into these gospels and read them line by line and see, like, can I corroborate any of this?
Mm.
Do I have good reason to believe this is ancient? Do I have good reason to believe this was written within the lifetime of eyewitnesses? Because if you want to lie about Jesus, the easiest way to lie about him is simply to wait till everyone who knows the truth is dead. If you wait that long, you can say anything you want about Jesus. So the early dating of the Gospels was important to me. Are they written early? Because they can only be written by eyewitnesses if they were written early. These are the kinds of things I had to dig through.
Mm.
And at the end of that, and I'm not somebody like, Lee is a journalist. He's going to talk to experts. I don't trust experts.
Mm.
I need to know, what is the basis for which you're giving me the expert opinion. I
Right.
want to go there, because that's going to be what I'm going to present to a jury. I may call in an expert witness, but trust me, they're going to call in an expert witness who's going to say the exact opposite thing. So
Right.
in the end, it's going to come back down to the evidence upon which you are pontificating. So let's get
Yes.
to that. And that's
Well,
what I need
and
to do.
I think that um, you can't escape the fact that to believe that a human being was God is a fairly substantial expectation of
Yeah.
somebody to do, because the truth is we are three-dimensional beings with five senses. I mean, I guess there's other senses, but for the most part, five senses. In a material world that we are aware of, that are calculated by those senses. I do believe in a transcendent world, as do you, but some don't. Like you said, materialist doesn't.
Right.
It's a closed system to them. So, but that limits how much we can know about the big picture. What the world you're in is very much about the material world. There's blood.
Well, what you just said is exactly right. I mean, my biggest presuppositional bias was I was a philosophical naturalist,
Yeah.
right? Space-time, matter, physics, chemistry. I'm not going to believe in anything outside of those as an explanation. The minute you insert a miracle claim,
Yeah.
then you're doing mythology. You're no longer doing history.
Well,
And so that was my view. But
Yeah.
here's how I overcame that.
Yeah.
And it was something I had to think about. And this is why I paralleled that book, Cold Case Christian, with another book called God's Crime Scene, where I talk about attributes of the universe. Look, I believed as an atheist in Big Bang cosmology. In other words, that everything in the universe, all space, time, and matter, based on several lines of scientific evidence, and some philosophical, but mostly scientific evidence, that all space, time, and this is why they still call Big Bang cosmology the standard cosmological model amongst astrophysicists, because more astrophysicists embrace this view of the origin of the universe than any other view. And it posits that everything comes into existence, all space, time, and matter, from nothing.
Nothing.
And there's the problem. In other words, the cause of space, time, and matter cannot be spatial, temporal, or material.
Yeah.
That means when we define nature, we're talking about space, time, and matter.
Yeah.
So if we're outside of space, time, and matter, we're already in at least something extra natural, supranatural, supernatural. And if you believe in Big Bang cosmology, you already believe there's something out there. The only question left is it personal or is it impersonal?
Yeah.
Is that force personal, like a divine being, or is it impersonal? And most of the time, people like, there's Lawrence Krauss, a lot of people who are not just dabble, they're experts, they're PhD'd in this area. They'll
Not in
talk
philosophy.
not in philosophy, but they are, and they'll say things like, hey, if we've got a quantum vacuum environment in which things pop into existence, if you wait long enough in that kind of environment, this universe could pop into existence. Well, they've already cheated. They've already stolen something spatial, something material, and wait long enough. Now they're stealing time. But there's the problem. The science demonstrates that there is no spatial, temporal, material environment in which anything can happen. It all pops into existence. So you cannot say, well, if you've got space, time, and matter, you can get space, time, and matter. Well, duh.
Yeah.
That's what that science demonstrates. We got space, time, and matter from nothing, true nothing, not whatever new version of nothing is. I wrote about this in God's Crime Scene. It's like when I was a kid, I would come home at school and I'd open the refrigerator and there'd be all this, fresh vegetables and stuff. And I'd say, there's nothing to eat in here because there was nothing. I'm redefining nothing.
Right.
Because there's a bunch of stuff in there. I just don't like it.
Right.
Well, that's what's happening here with these astrophysicists who would say, well, yeah, there's something, but they've redefined nothing to include something. And by definite, you're right. We're not thinking, well, from a philosophical perspective, nothing means nothing. It's like Aristotle says, it's the stuff that rocks think about. Nothing.
You're right. No, it's
So
a
it's
wonderful, and I love that phrase. Well, that's really the thing that's interesting to me, because one of the things that the new atheists really champion is, listen, we're all about reason and logic, and that which is repeatable, testable, and observable. So again, the material world, and so the problem they have, and so I say this, God said that there's a difference. They're very smart. I give them that. These are very smart people, but what they lack is wisdom. And the word of God says that the fear of God is beginning of wisdom. So what I mean by that is they take a they take a presupposition worldview of materialism. So they've already said there is no option to a transcendent. It can't even be considered.
That's right.
Well, if that exists, which they haven't proven it doesn't exist. They've just chosen a priori to say this is the only way science works, is the materials version, which by the way is their arbitrary definition. All of our people, our Christians who started it, needed God so they could count on the fact that what they were trying to accomplish was simply viewing his handiwork. I see what you made, God. Let's see how you did it. This is amazing. Should be the greatest scientific discovery in history. God, why wouldn't that be an interesting thing? And they always mimic that desire. They find, well, there must be men out in space, there's aliens, there's panspermia. They have all these other ways of counterfeiting the simple notion that what if God was here? What if God showed up on earth? What if God dimensionalized himself? What if God, who transcends, well, who made God? They always use that one. Who made God?
And a couple of things about that. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think part of this is that if you believe that there's something outside of space, time, and matter that's the cause of the universe, then the biggest miracle is not on the New Testament pages at all. It's in Genesis 1. Everything from nothing. If there is a being that can do that, that opened the door for me, because it means that, hey, I'm sure that these are all the stuff in the New Testament is what I call small potato miracles. These are not big miracles.
Right.
That's Genesis 1. That's the one. Okay.
This
is all small potato stuff. But here's how I put it in God's crime scene. Look, when I do an investigation, I believe in science. I'm a huge science fan, but I believe in the most robust version of science. Here's what I mean. When I do an investigation, I'm trying to answer the classic investigative questions: what, how, when, why, where. But it turns out if I ask those what, when, how, why, where questions, no one's going to go to jail, because I'm missing the sixth question. The sixth question is a who question. Now, science would say, well, you can ask the first five, but you can't ask the who question. Well, hang on. Why? And you realize that the entire history of science, until about the last 2, maybe 3 generations, always included the sixth question. Who? There was always a who. Now, you want to take that out. Why? Because there's no who in science. Yeah, I understand that's your rule, but why is that your rule when it was never the rule before? Here's why I say that. When we see the information in DNA, the first inclination I have is a who. Information, you cannot get information from space, time, and matter in physics and chemistry. You can wait as long as you want. You can't get it. It takes a selection process. Right. So if that's information in the DNA, we have to switch now based on the evidence from a what to a who, because the only experience we have with information is that it comes from intelligence. Who's. In other words, if I walked into a death scene, someone's lying on the floor, and there's blood spatter on the wall. Well, there's 4 ways to die: accidental, natural, suicide, and homicide. And from the blood spatter, I really can't tell what it is. You know why? Because look, I could fall and hit my head. Blood spatters. I might have tripped accidentally. I might have committed suicide, took too many pills, passed out, hit the floor. I might have had a heart attack naturally, or I might have been pushed down. It could be a homicide. I cannot determine which of it is, because it turns out that the physics of the blood and the chemistry of the type of blood, the physics of the movement of the blood could cause that spatter. On the other hand, if I walk into that room and instead of blood spatter, I have a message written on the wall, he deserved it. Well, now I'm looking for a who. Why? Right. Because I can't get that message, that information, with just a what, when, how, why, or where. I have to ask the who question. All I'm saying about science is, will you just I won't jump to a who if a what can answer it.
Yes.
But if no what can answer it, am I allowed a who? No, I'm not allowed. There's the problem with modern science. So I would say I love science, but I love the most robust version of science that still asks all 6 questions.
No, and that's wonderful. I love the intellectual approach. I think it's sadly missing in American churches. The lack of apologetics, the lack of logic and reason, all things that were part of the university system that Christians created so they would be able to reason together, as God said.
Yeah.
Didn't do that in any other religion. He didn't say, let's reason, let's talk this out, let's figure it out, let's wrestle. Nobody else came up with that because we have the truth. You said the Genesis, and I say this, I have a joke about, we all have Genesis stories. Even the atheist has a Genesis story, but it's written by the smartest of the smart. These guys that teach at Oxford and Cambridge, and they have double doctorates, and they believe only in matter and in time and space and reason, and that's it. And their Genesis story goes like this. In the beginning, there was nothing, and it blew up. And people laugh because it sounds funny, but then what they don't realize is that is legitimately what had to happen. You talked about Genesis 1, which is the meaning of life. The first line in the Bible tells you why we're here. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And he made time, space, matter, people, humans, why we're here, what's going on, who started all this. But then we have a cousin. You talk about the robust realm of scriptures and science. We have a first cousin to Genesis is in the New Testament in 1 John 1. In the beginning was the Word. And
Right.
the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. Is the Logos, which is information encoded in our genes. So now God's taken it even more sophisticated level. Let me give you the next phase of how intricate and sophisticated and nuanced this biological existence is that you can't account for. You can't account for this. Even if everything blew up and chemicals cooled and came together and here it sits, how did that turn into a biological living being?
Right.
They don't even try to account for that. But I also talked to them about, you talked about the how. I say science is great, but it's a descriptive exercise, a discipline. Who, what, when, where, and how. It describes what science, and that's science, that's physics. What science never has access to is why. That's the big word, because that's the metaphysic word. That's the word that says, why is any of this happening? The teleology, or the meaning of this, can only be answered by a transcendent cause. There is, otherwise, we're all just amoebas floating through Earth. We're going to die, go into
Right.
non-existence.
And that's something that I do talk about. If you jettison the who, you jettison meaningful why answers. You can still get why answers, right? If you said, okay, why is that third domino falling over? Well, you can describe the physical process of the first three dominoes to explain why it falls over.
I guess I'm going for the meta narrative of why is there something,
but when you
rather
ask
than
the
nothing.
question, these are questions around the problem of evil. Here's what I would say: there are 8 attributes of the universe that everyone has to explain. This is what I was struggling with as a new believer, and this is why I talk about in God's crime scene. Number 1 is the origin of the universe, the fine-tuning or the appearance of fine-tuning in the universe, the origin of life, like you just described, and the appearance of design in biology, consciousness, mind, not just brain, but mind, and free agency in a deterministic, physicalistic universe is hard to account for. It's why we call it the problem of mind and free agency. A lot of, like Sam Harris, for example, denies that we have free will.
Yeah, he's a determinist, I think.
Right, a determinist. And then finally, you have objective, transcendent moral obligations, which we all feel. And finally, we have a standard of righteousness by which we would call something evil. These 8 characteristics of the universe, you end up having to jettison parts of them. Remember, in every worldview begins with an origin. It answers the questions: how did we get here? Why is it so messed up? And how do we fix it? Those are the basic 3 questions. And how you answer the first question largely determines how you answer the other 2. So if you think you are just evolved creatures blindly and there's no purpose to any of this, well, then Dawkins is right, and the universe has just nothing to offer but blind, pitiless indifference, because it doesn't really care. There's no why. That's a stupid question to ask. There's no who to ask that question of. Why? It's just the way it is. Get over it. There's no evil or no good. It's just, this is the stuff that happens when a physical process begins. And that's usually unsatisfying to most of us. And we can try to live that way. And I did live that way. I was very happy with the notion that I was going to be back in the dirt. I mean, who cares? that really the goal is to live a meaningful life, and I get to define my own meaning, so I can actually be quite comfortable dying on my deathbed knowing that I fulfilled what I established as my own meaning. I can say, hey, I did everything I wanted to do. Some people will say I've traveled everywhere I wanted to travel. I left something meaningful for a legacy. I took care of my kids. Good for me. Check the box. I'm ready to go. And if we're in pain, a lot of I would have thought, well, I'd watched some of my family members die in pain, and I was a non-believer. I'm like, hey, good for them. It's over.
Yeah.
So a lot of this, I had no problem navigating as an atheist, and I think I was pretty well behaved. I don't probably behave a lot differently than I did before. I couldn't have grounded why those behaviors are good, but I was raised in a Western culture that held those values, and I reflected most of those values. And then I was hired as a police officer, and I worked as almost a decade before I became a believer. So I think that, a lot of those things I would say that Christians, I mean, you see this all the time. Christians fall constantly because we get sucked in. Here's something you said earlier that I think is really important. The problem behind everything is pride. It's always been pride. Pride is the thing that drives all of the motivations. It's that I am God. That's I want sex, money, power. I want. It's about me. The antidote, the antonym for pride is simply humility. And the way to achieve solutions in the Christian worldview is the epitome of humility, because it requires us to recognize we're not God and that we are in need of something we cannot earn.
Yeah.
And we have to bend our knee humbly, not just our knee to accept Christ as Savior, but then to run every decision I make through the lens of what would God have for me based on what's been revealed in Scripture. That is a constant act of humility. And there is the challenge, is that most of us struggle with this, right? We struggle with humility. And a worldview that does not highly value humility will not solve, because we're all of us, whether we are believers or not, we're all designed in the image of the same God. Yeah. So this is the one universal solution to all of our problems, and it's encapsulated in the gospel. And that's why the gospel is the cure for every kind of stew, because it directly addresses the problem of pride. That we are going to be a slave. Everyone's a slave. There's freedom in Christ, but you'll still be a slave. Paul says he's a slave to Christ. Yeah. The difference is, when you're a slave to the things that are that come from the mind of the maker, then you have the best. You now, because you're submitting to something already. You're a slave to your passions, to your desires, to all kinds of other things that are not helping you flourish. But when you're enslaved to the mind of God, you now are in that sweet spot because you've been designed by that God and you can flourish. We have to make a choice about what it is we are willing to enslave ourselves to. And that's the choice for young people.
Well, and like you said, that terminology is so grating to a typical humanist, because they're like, that's what they despise. I don't need somebody else to tell me how to live. Yeah. I don't need somebody to give me morals. I have morals.
Yet every one of us who says that, and I said it for years, we don't recognize we've already bent our knee to some other influence.
Of course.
Where did we get that from? We got that largely now from media.
Right.
You're bending your knee to the mind, the kind of collective think of social media. You now have values that have been determined not by you and not by the ancient book, but instead by that temporary flash that'll change again in a decade.
Yes.
What we wear, what we think about, how we position, how we use our language, all of this, you've already enslaved yourself to something. You've already embraced some set of values that didn't really come from you.
Right.
You saw them somewhere else. And so the question is not like anyone can avoid this. The only question is, from where are you going to draw? Which well are you going to dip your bucket in? That's all that's left, because the idea, you're thirsty, you're going to drink. The only question is, which well are you going to drink from?
So I don't want to completely abandon the book, Person of Interest.
It's no big deal. I'm just glad to talk about any of this stuff.
No. And you're marvelous at it, and I appreciate your that you did the work, that you did the discipline. Now it might come a little bit more natural to you. Clearly, you have that kind of personality to become a detective. That's a lot of work, man. That's a lot of difficult, time-consuming, mind-numbing.
A lot of it is just really boring. This is true for police work in general. If you're working in patrol, it's a 10-hour shift. 9 hours and 45 minutes are probably pure boredom, and 15
Yes.
minutes of sheer terror. Those are the extremes. Okay. So that's really how you live. In working investigations, it's pretty boring because I'm trying to uncover every piece of data and anticipating that if I don't uncover it, the defense attorney will.
Mm.
So I want to be the first to it. And that's the problem with it. I sometimes will get stuck when I do these kinds of books because I got to stop turning stones. Okay. At some point you got to stop. Just, let's write it, because you're constantly thinking, and every one of these chapters could have been a book. And I was told by a couple of friends, hey, this is a 10-book series, not just 10 chapters. Well, yeah, but I want to give you a 30,000-foot view. Now, what's interesting about that book is that, you have limitations, and Zondervan doesn't want to print a book that at a certain page, the way they print the papers and bend the papers, you get a certain limit, then you start to get really expensive. And I didn't want an expensive book. So what I did was I limited my endnotes to 50 pages, which sounds like a lot, but it's not, because I had to kick out 270 pages on a PDF file, which is available online. So there's actually 320 pages, more pages of endnotes than there are of the actual book. But I knew if I put that data in the book, you'd stop after about half a chapter. I want something that's accessible and readable, and it reads fast. That's important to me.
Well, and it is. I would have read it by the time I got to you, but like I said, I had to get it in Amazon. It wasn't available. So, and then it was slow. So I don't know what's going on out there, but so I got through the first chapter. But the one thing that watching your teaching, and I'm sure it was an abbreviated version of even that, because I think it was a one session.
Yeah.
But the thing that I love, that to me was a little different than I'd heard other places. One thing that people grapple with, and it's the reason I brought up your atheism, was because I have a lot of atheists that for some reason watch my show, and they kind of like to, they respect me, and we fence a little bit intellectually, but at least they're open to trying to hear what I have to say, and vice versa. And I love that. I love if people can agree to disagree agreeably. We've done something for culture. Yeah, but I wanted to get into that because I wanted people to say there is a intellectual approach to faith that is really beautiful and sophisticated, and you can rest your hat on that this is legit. That it has to be grappled with. And so you talked about the religions prior to Christ. Now, of course, some of those coincided with Israel. So the premonition of where Christ is coming from is through this lineage of folks. So in a way, they were around the same time, but in different regions of the world, maybe didn't know each other. It depends on how far away it was. But the thing that I really loved about what you did was, if you're an honest Christian, if you're honest and you care about truth, there are things that are difficult to navigate as a Christian. The problem of pain being probably the number one, and it's probably caused more atheism than anything else, is I asked for him to save Grandma. She died. Screw you, God. I think that's happened so many times that he didn't answer what they needed, and they felt they were betrayed, and they abandoned him. But there are lots of other religions. There were people that had their other perspectives, and usually polytheistic or some other form of witchcraft or whomever. All the old tribes had witch doctors and medicine men telling the stories of the tribe and who they were and where they came from and their history and their lineage and so forth. And you talk about these other ideas, even these other representatives of a Messiah figure, and people would worship him or at least follow him, like Buddha. Never claimed to be God, I don't believe, but he was this sort of divine figure to a certain degree. And then Jesus comes on, 3 years really, as a ministry to say, guess what, I'm God, just want to let you know before I head out. And from that point on, under the difficulty of communication, under the difficulty of people certainly can't just text. You're not going to believe what I just saw. You don't have emails. You don't have video cameras. This dude right from the dead, we don't have any of that.
Right.
So you had some limitations, certainly better than 3,000 years prior, but still difficult to get information out, to tell people, to write letters, to keep it, to have somebody hand scribe it and send the next version. But suddenly these other guys were referencing Jesus.
Right.
suddenly they said, "Oh, yeah, no, yeah, I get Jesus. Yeah, he's part of it. No, we were before him, but still, he's part." Like they felt like they needed his prestige
Right.
to give greater gravitas to their previous or religious belief that preceded him.
Yeah, so unsurprisingly, the religions that emerge following the Christian era all recognize Jesus. So Muslims have Jesus on the pages of the Quran. The Baha'i faith, Jesus is a part. Anything that follows Christianity, of course, has to hat tip Jesus in some way.
Yeah,
But
but I mean, didn't
interestingly,
some come before him
right, but
and then
interestingly,
sort of?
all the religions that preceded Jesus
Yeah,
that survive into the Common Era,
right.
because not all do.
Yeah,
Hindus, Krishna, Buddhists exist, of course, on the backside of Jesus, and all of them will somehow modify their claims. Many that are no longer like Attis and Mithras, those deities, the worshippers of those deities actually started to assign attributes either to their practice, like Mithraic worshippers started to have like a Lord's Supper,
mm,
following the Christians emerging in Rome. Attis starts to take on attributes of Jesus only in the Common Era, not before the Common Era because Jesus didn't exist yet. Heracles starts to sound more and more like Jesus in the Common Era. In other words, the worshippers of those faith systems, which don't even exist anymore, Attis, Heracles, and Mithras, began to shape their thinking about their God and kind of merge Jesus into the story. Then you have a bunch of people like the Buddhists and the Hindus and Krishna. Well, they'll say, well, there's a spot for Jesus over here.
mm.
Jesus is also on the road to Buddhahood. He is a wise, the one perfect guru. I mean, there's lots of ways that leaders will now merge Jesus into their systems. So if all you had was the writing of the non-Christian scriptures, like the Quran and Baha'u'llah and Mahdi Muslims, all of that, and you had the wisdom statements of Buddhist leaders, Hindu leaders, Krishna leaders, you could reconstruct the story of Jesus, not from Christian scripture, but from non-Christian scripture. Enough information, in fact, that you start to reconstruct, because these leaders will often talk about the gospel accounts and elements of the gospel. They'll repeat them as they're talking about Jesus. And so you could learn something about Jesus from the gospels just from Buddhist leaders, just from Hindu leaders. So it turns out that you're not going to get rid of Jesus even by destroying the Christian scriptures. You'd have to destroy the writings of non-Christian leaders and of their scriptures, because many of those scriptures also include Jesus. It's amazing the impact,
That is amazing.
pre-Christian impact and then post-Christian impact on world religion. Now, as an atheist, I didn't care about that.
Yeah.
It's all nonsense. But you're going to have a hard time denying. You take all of the universities that have been established globally in the history of the modern university, and you look at every group that's not Christian, Hindus, Buddhists, seculars, Jewish, whatever, you put them all together, multiply by 10. You're starting to come close to how many universities have been established by Christians. As a matter of fact, more universities have been founded and closed under Christianity than have been founded by non-Christians.
Wow.
That's the impact on the modern university.
Mm.
That to me was enough to say, okay, now look, a lot of these universities today that were founded by Christians deny Jesus altogether. I get
Right.
that. But if you go to their most ancient buildings and look on the surfaces of those buildings, guess who you can reconstruct? You can reconstruct Jesus from just the university buildings on the campuses of the top 15 universities in the world today. I did it in the book. You could learn everything you need to know about Jesus just from their buildings. So you got to destroy more than the manuscripts of Christianity. You got to destroy the history of art, the history of literature, including non-Christian literature, the history of music, because it turns out no one does more for music than Christians, because we sing every week and we have developed, and music has progressed. The major, minor scales, instruments, harmonies, all of these things, even musical notation, created by Christians in an effort to worship God with music in a church setting.
Yes.
And everyone
Now,
benefits from that, even those
there
who
was
deny Jesus.
there's no equivalent in any other religions or philosophy when in regards to that type of an influence within a culture that truly create. I mean, in this case, Judeo-Christian culture created the West. I mean, it created an entire belief system of a
Yeah.
giant group of people that changed the world. But you never found anything that even, because I'm guessing there's Buddhist chants and there's,
Oh, yeah, of course.
yeah,
But the question is, does it have the kind of impact on the history of music? Not
yeah,
just Western music, because what happens is now all of those instruments that were created by Christians are used all around the world.
yeah,
We export our ideas about harmony, about use of major and minor scales. We export those ideas globally. But what's interesting is that this is when an activity starts to become and embraced as a duty. When Paul says we should be singing spiritual hymns, when we see that Jesus sang a hymn at the Lord's Supper, when David writes hymns in the Old Testament, this now is not just that there are some people within the Christian community who are interested in music. It's that no, actually, Christians see singing and music as a dutiful act of worship that we are called to do by the Maker through Scripture. And that kind of impulse means that we are going to be dutiful in the way we do it. So you'll see that, where else in the world do people gather every week, several times a weekend, to listen to people sing on a stage?
right,
Well, concerts.
yeah,
There's way more churches in America every weekend with singers than there are concerts. And that's because we see it as a duty, as an act of worship. So I
well,
think that's one of the things that catalyzes an activity.
yes,
And when you wait 2,000 years and suddenly you see a huge. So I just went back and looked at all of the singers, secular singers, based on Billboard charts, based on IMDb databases, based on Rolling Stone magazine, and just looked at all of their catalogs. And I had a couple of research assistants who helped me with this. All but two in the last 150 years on the secular charts, all but two had sung a song about Jesus,
wow,
often very demeaning songs about Jesus,
yeah,
but they still sing about Jesus. This cannot be said of any other living human.
right,
So that to me is powerful. That catalyst, and that's the kind of influence you would expect if Jesus was who he said he was. It's hard to deny, even those who would say, well, I don't think Jesus really existed and that he was God, that the notion, just the idea of what Jesus represents is transformative for so many people. Like it used to be, people would say, I don't like Christians, but I do like that Jesus guy. I think actually that's changing.
yeah,
I think we're in a world right now where it's no longer an objection that's based on evidence, even an objection that's based on the problem of pain. And I know I'm starting this, I know we're at the end of our time, so I don't want to get too far in this, but here's what I think is happening instead. What I think is happening instead is that we are in a so self-reflective culture that the idea that you would ever do anything to limit my desires is no longer acceptable. And if there's a version of Jesus out there on the pages of the New Testament, and there is, that says there are certain things I ought not do even though I want to, well, then I can't embrace that Jesus. I don't want to be part of that.
right,
So that's where I think the bigger challenge is going to be, is are you willing to bend your knee, even the knee of your desires, to what it is God would have for you? That's going to be a harder and harder sell for Gen Z and for the next generation that follows Gen Z. I guess they're calling it the alpha generation, whatever they're going to call it. But the point is, that's going to be, it's no longer, well, is there good evidence for this? It's going to be, do I want to wear the T-shirt? Do I want to be identified with this group?
right. Right. Well, I mean, and of course, again, the beautiful thing about the Bible, if you take it seriously, it's not only the rule book for how the world works and how humanity works, but it tells you the answers to some of these questions. And one of the beautiful pieces of wisdom, there's nothing new under the sun.
Right.
I mean, all we're looking at right now in the woke generation is what I call systemic narcissism, and this harkens back thousands of years ago to Epicureanism, which was the beginning of hedonism, which was the beginning of just do what thou wilt. I mean, that which is pride.
Well, all this is grounded in our human nature, and our human nature is very ancient. It hasn't changed.
Right.
So.
But I think that's another clue, though.
Yeah.
In observing, man, we see things repeating themselves. There seems to be this particular trajectory of how humans continue to behave, looking for redemption, looking for some freedom, looking for some peace, not finding it in substance. So they needed transcendence. But then why was one guy not only so influential in so many areas of culture? Why is he so demeaned? Why is he so hated? What is it about Jesus that they use his name, Jesus Christ, as a, epitaph? You don't see people saying Buddha this, Muhammad the You're not, you start saying that about Muhammad, you're not going to live. But they are so cavalier with the name of the God man, of the one who came. Well, we believe there's a spiritual world. We believe there's a God. That means there's an enemy, and he hates God's creation. Everything that God said, be fruitful and multiply. What is happening with the New World Economic Forums? We need to diminish the amount of people that are on the earth. We need to let people die off. We need some of the people to not exist. The certain self-appointed elite never volunteer, I noticed, to be the eliminated, but they certainly know who needs to be eliminated. It's so evil. It's so narcissistic. It's so pride-filled to be God. Megalomaniacs, but because they control the dissemination of information. They have Google, they have Twitter, well, not Twitter anymore, Facebook. They have these ways to communicate or cease communicating. It gives them a whole lot of power, and they are wielding it with an iron fist, truly, because they fear the one thing that they cannot escape is truth and light, and so they need to put the light out. You kind of found in this book, I wish we had more time. I mean, I could talk to you longer. I don't want to keep you any more than in case you're busy, but I do want people to get this person of interest, because it really will give you some beautiful information. One of the great 20th century apologists, C.S. Lewis, loved history, and he loved mythology. I know you know this story I'm saying, but he was led to Christ amongst others, J.R.R. Tolkien, and Tolkien gave him a phrase that helped it all click for him. He said, I've seen all these myths. And they seem to be a narrative of the human existence. They seem to correlate with what we see is true about how humans work in real time, with the wars, with the poverty, with the difficulties. Right. And these myths kind of speak on these ideas and these thoughts. And here comes Jesus, kind of telling the same stories that you mentioned that these other guys did. And he said, but he's a true myth.
Right.
There is no Zeus. Nobody ever presumes Zeus can be found somewhere. There was no Thor. We knew it with mythology. But as you said, Jesus actually was here. It's what I love about when I read the Bible in 1 year. I wanted to do it, but I remember thinking, oh, crap, I'm going to have to read Numbers, Deuteronomy.
Right.
I mean,
all the hard stuff.
I didn't want to go through he begot he and he begot him. But I realized that I figured I'm going to read every one of these guys' names because God put it in there for a reason. And I realized God was meticulously letting you know these were real people. This was a real guy who lived for a moment on this desert, right, who had this kid, who had this kid, who had this kid. And eventually, here comes Jesus. If you were to close out this particular interview, and I sure hope we can have more because there's so many more topics I'd love to go, and I love your wonderful representation of our faith with intellect and insight. But if there was one sort of concept that you would lead somebody that just kind of stumbled onto this podcast right now, maybe heard a little bit and kind of got intrigued, that you would leave them with, that they need to consider, because this literally, if this is true, there is no more important decision in your life than to realize if you don't accept Jesus, you're going to hell. This is big. This is huge. We want you to know him, not because you join our religion or we need you to pad our numbers. We want to tell you what we found. There's a way home. What would you tell these people, or how would you inspire them to maybe move to the next space, even as an atheist, and say, maybe it's time to make this leap into Jesus?
Well, let me just close with, you talked about C.S. Lewis, and one of the things he said, I've quoted years ago and been quoted by many, many people, is that if Christianity is not true, it's of no importance. But if it is true, it's of critical importance. The one thing it cannot be is moderately important. It's either one extreme or the other. And I think if people think that my ambition is really the underlying motivation for sharing this is somehow political, especially the generation of my son who's in his 30s. That generation is put off by that. And that's not my ambition. I mean, I don't have a goal, an agenda that's cultural, because I believe that God is sovereign. I don't really, I'll be honest with you, I don't worry much about the state of the world. I think stupid, you started this conversation by talking about stupid.
Yeah.
Stupid sometimes is a choice.
Mm.
When you talk about, stupid and happy, well, those are two things are related. I've never known anyone who lives their entire life in the bullseye of the information world, and there are people who do this for a living, right? The Ben Shapiro's of the world, the Matt Walsh's of the world. They basically live in the information bullseye because they're going to be podcasting about it tomorrow. Those people are miserable, and don't think that you're miserable disposition because you're watching in minutia everything that's happening in the world around you. You've not chosen to be stupid about some things. There's a circle around which I draw things that matter to me. Don't think for a second that your frustration about the world is not affecting your way you are as a husband or as a son or as a father. These things spill over. And at 61, I'm now at a place where I'm like, okay, I already know how I'm going to vote. Nothing I listen to is going to change the way I can act in the world. And I could, one thing changes everything, the gospel. Gospel. No candidate's going to, I don't vote for candidates. I vote for future potential realities. I don't vote for candidates. No candidate's going to save me. The gospel's going to save me.
Amen.
So at 61, I've just chosen to stop paying attention. I'll give you, I voted. I voted early. I didn't check the results of the vote for probably 2 weeks. Does it matter? I've been in a state where my vote never counted. Did it change anything? The gospel will. If I'm going to talk about anything tomorrow with anyone, it's going to be the gospel. The one thing that has the power to change everything.
Yeah.
Nothing else has that power. So I would say that, look, make a decision. Is the gospel true? If it's true, it's the most important truth you're ever going to, it'll change everything.
Yes.
And my goal is not to change you into my political affiliation.
No.
I could care less. It's the gospel. Once you are at the feet of Jesus and you've bent your knee to Jesus, things begin to change. And by the way, they begin to change for the better because you're bending your knee to your maker.
Yes.
Not to some ancient human. No, the one who made you. In the beginning was the Word. All things came into being through him. Apart from him, nothing came into being which has ever come into being. That's John chapter 1, verse 1. Just think about it. It's worth your time.
Oh, amen, brother. I think that a lot of times intellectuals and secular humanists and atheists think that if I make this leap, I have to jettison my intellect. And what they don't realize is, no, actually, you are going to get a clarity to your intellect that you never had access to before. And you're going to be excited because you're going to have revelation of the deeper things of what you're trying to think about. And they're suddenly going to make sense. God bless you, G101. I got to tell you guys, I want you to get this book because you need to educate yourself. You need to be well-informed, prepared Christians, being ready to give an answer whenever somebody asks you. And if you're not doing that, shame on you. God said, shame on you. Study to show yourself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not be ashamed, rightly divided the word of truth. No more wussified Christians, no more half-baked, I'm going to show up to church. Those days are over, guys. It's time to get all in or get out. But we need actual warrior believers who are ready to have a militia of the mind and go fight with the spiritual battle, which is all we're fighting. It's truth and lies, Satan and God. Join the right side. God wins every time. But in the meantime, we have a battle ahead of us. God bless you, brother. I appreciate being here. We're going to have you on some more if you don't mind down the road. And, man, I hope you sell 1 million of these books and we continue to watch what God will do in this crazy day and age. So it's that simple. That's how you change the world. You discover that God exists, and you prove it, and then you talk about it, and you talk about it, and you talk about it. Because if you, in fact, believed that the God that you say revealed himself as a human did, then you tell people, because it would be the most amazing story of all kind. Wyatt, I'm glad that you got to watch that. What do you think about the intellectual pursuit of Christians? Do you think that's something that is being neglected in the church, or do you find that most Christians are really deep?
I don't think most people in general are not deep.
That's
They are
true.
about as shallow as a kiddie pool.
That's right. And I got to tell you, I don't even know any generals. And then here we sit, wondering if those guys are preparing and watching and praying. But we all need to, because, you know, folks, I told you that if I was going to make a militia of the mind, it would be with people who have a mind and want to fight and defend that which is right and true and good. So if this is interesting to you, we're getting ready to launch the big campaign here in a few weeks. When I just got a few tweaks on my website that aren't quite worked out, and once they are, then we're going to be able to really do a nice big campaign for the Militia of the Mind and the first who get it launched, the Mighty 10,000. Some of you, by the way, have already joined. God bless you. But I'm excited. I still have hope, and I'm still hanging on that there are lots of people who still care about freedom and liberty and religious liberties and free speech and courage and standing for something greater than themselves. That's what we're doing. That's what this is all about. I am simply a comedian. But somebody called me God's comic, so I've hung on to that. And I'm trying my best to remind you that to be courageous is all that is necessary. And even if you do it alone, you might just start a spark. So, folks, political correctness is evil, and it's what really started all this crap. So let's end it. PC free is liberty, so be free of ever being politically correct. And if they ever say you're politically incorrect, please tell them thank you. What a compliment. I don't know everything. And I don't have connections to everybody, but it's getting bigger and bigger because clearly the peasants are rising up. So, son, grab a pitchfork and a torch, and let's go fight like men. If we end up in a ditch, hey, at least we gave it a shot. This is God's Comic Brad Stine saying I hope you enjoyed that. We'll be back next Monday. And until then, remember, it's just me, God's Comic Brad Stine. And you know what I do. I'm just putting the woke back to sleep. See ya.